Trapped in a web of lies and control, he must confront the manipulative woman who's dominated his life for years. Will he break free, or will her relentless games pull him back into the darkness? I never realized how subtle control could feel until I met Clara. From the outside, she was perfect. Intelligent, funny, charismatic, the kind of woman who could light up a room with her smile. When we first started dating, I thought I had found someone who genuinely saw me, who understood me better than anyone else ever had. She had this way of making me feel important, like I mattered in ways I never had before. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the way she treated me began to change, and what I thought was love started to feel like something far darker. At first, it was little things. She would compliment me on how much she liked the shirt I wore, but then add, "You should stop wearing those other colors. They don't really suit you." I thought it was just her opinion, nothing serious. Then it became about my friends. "Why do you even hang out with them?" she'd ask. "They don't really care about you. They only use you when it's convenient." I started canceling plans, thinking she was probably right. After all, she seemed to have my best interests at heart. The strange part was how warm and affectionate she'd be after criticizing me. Whenever I gave in, did what she suggested, she would reward me with affection, soft kisses, laughter, that smile that made my heart melt. I didn't notice it at first, but it was conditioning, a system of punishment and reward that slowly reshaped me into the person she wanted me to be. I found myself second-guessing my choices, my words, even my thoughts, because I had internalized this fear of disappointing her. There was one evening that should have been a red flag, but I ignored it. We were at a small dinner party with mutual friends, and someone mentioned a funny story from my college days. I joined in, adding some details, but Clara interrupted with a laugh that wasn't kind. "Oh, don't listen to him. He always exaggerates," she said. The group laughed, and I forced a smile, but inside I felt small. Later that night, when I brought it up, she brushed it off. "I was just joking," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "Don't be so sensitive." And just like that, I felt guilty for even questioning her. That was how it always worked. She would cut me down in public or in private, then soothe me afterward, convincing me that I was the one overreacting. I started to doubt my own judgment. Sometimes I'd sit alone and wonder, was I really too sensitive? Was she right about me? The worst part was, I began to rely on her approval to feel okay about myself. Months turned into years, and I changed without realizing it. My friends stopped inviting me out because I never showed up. My family visits grew less frequent because Clara always seemed to need me more. When I did see them, they noticed the difference. My sister once asked, "Are you okay? You don't seem like yourself anymore." I laughed it off, but her words stayed with me. Clara's control extended to finances, too. At first, she insisted on splitting everything equally, which seemed fair. But soon she began managing the money, saying she was better at organizing bills. I agreed. It was easier that way. Until I realized she had full control while I had none. If I wanted to buy something for myself, she would question me. "Do you really need that? Don't you think it's a waste?" It wasn't about money. It was about control. The scariest part was how I defended her to everyone else. When friends drifted away, I told myself they were jealous of how close Clara and I were. When my mother hinted that Clara seemed too controlling, I snapped, saying she didn't understand. In truth, I didn't want to admit that they were right. Admitting that would mean admitting I had lost myself. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I remember one night lying awake next to Clara as she slept peacefully. My chest felt heavy, my thoughts racing. I asked myself, when was the last time I made a decision without worrying what she would think? When was the last time I felt like me? The answer frightened me. I couldn't remember. The breaking point came unexpectedly. It was at another social gathering, this time with colleagues from my job. I had been working on a project for months, and my boss congratulated me in front of everyone. For a moment, I felt proud, like I had done something worthwhile. But Clara leaned in, her voice low but sharp. "Don't let it go to your head. You only got it because I helped you organize your schedule." The words stung, especially because others overheard and laughed awkwardly. The pride drained out of me, replaced by shame. That night, I confronted her more seriously than I ever had before. "Why do you do that? Why do you make me feel small?" I asked. She looked genuinely shocked, even hurt. "I can't believe you'd accuse me of that," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I've done everything for you, supported you, and this is how you repay me?" And just like that, I was the villain. I found myself apologizing, begging her not to be upset, even though I had been the one hurt. It was then I realized the depth of her manipulation. She had mastered the art of twisting reality until I couldn't tell what was true anymore. For weeks after, I lived in a fog of confusion. I felt trapped, but I couldn't imagine leaving. She had tied me to her in so many ways, emotionally, financially, socially, that the idea of walking away felt impossible. I kept telling myself I loved her, that love meant sacrifice. But a small voice inside me whispered, "This isn't love. This is control." That voice grew louder when I reconnected with an old friend, Mark. He noticed the change in me immediately. "You're not the same person you used to be," he said bluntly. "It's like you've disappeared." His words struck something deep inside me. For the first time in years, I admitted the truth out loud. I don't know who I am anymore. It was the beginning of a painful awakening, one that forced me to look at Clara not as the woman I loved, but as the woman who had systematically dismantled my sense of self. I realized I had a choice: stay and let myself fade completely, or fight to reclaim who I used to be. The realization that I had lost myself didn't arrive in one thunderclap moment, but rather as a slow, creeping tide I could no longer ignore. Every day after that conversation with Mark felt like I was walking through fog with a faint light flickering in the distance. For the first time, I began questioning everything Clara said, everything she did. And once I allowed those questions into my mind, the cracks in the illusion grew wider. Clara noticed immediately. She always noticed. If I hesitated before agreeing with her, if I didn't smile at her little jokes the way I used to, if I paused to consider before doing what she wanted, her eyes would narrow just slightly, calculating. "Is something wrong?" she would ask in that sweet voice laced with unspoken threat. "You've been distant lately." I would quickly shake my head. "No, nothing's wrong, just tired," I lied. And she pretended to believe me. But deep down, I knew she was keeping a mental ledger of my every shift in behavior. Clara thrived on control, and the moment she sensed it slipping, she would tighten her grip. The punishments were subtle, but effective. A cold shoulder, a sigh loud enough to fill the room, a refusal to answer my texts while I was at work. Then, when I became anxious and tried harder to please her, she would reward me with warmth, intimacy, affection. The cycle was so deeply ingrained that even recognizing it didn't make it easy to escape. It's terrifying to realize how much of yourself you've surrendered when you can't even remember where the surrender began. One evening, after another tense dinner where Clara criticized how I chewed my food, I excused myself and went out for a walk. My phone buzzed. It was Mark. "You sound like you need air," he said when I answered. His voice was steady, rounding. He invited me to meet him at a cafe, and against every instinct Clara had planted in me, I agreed. We sat in the dim corner of the cafe, and I spilled everything. Not just about Clara's comments or her control, but about the way I felt hollow inside, like I was living someone else's life. Mark listened without interruption, his gaze steady, his hands folded on the table. When I finished, he leaned forward. "She's manipulating you," he said quietly. "This isn't love. This is control dressed as care." The words hit me like a blow, because they echoed the small voice I'd been trying to silence. "But what if I'm overreacting? What if it's just me?" I asked. Mark shook his head. "That's exactly what she wants you to think. Doubt is her weapon. If she can make you doubt yourself, you'll never question her." I went home that night shaken, carrying a storm inside me. Clara was waiting, her arms crossed, her expression sharp. "Where were you?" she demanded. I stammered something about going for a walk, but she didn't buy it. "You're lying," she said coldly. "Who were you with?" The interrogation went on, her voice sharp, her accusations relentless, until I was exhausted and apologizing again just to make it stop. But instead of crumbling under her anger, I felt a spark of resistance. For the first time, I recognized the script. She accused, I defended, she escalated, I broke down, she forgave.
and I hated myself for knowing it and still playing my role. The next day, I made a decision. I started a keeping journal. It wasn't much, just a notebook hidden in the back of my closet, but it became my lifeline. Every time Clara said something that made me doubt myself, I wrote it down. Every manipulation, every twist of words, every punishment and reward. Seeing it in black and white stripped away the fog. It was no longer just a feeling, it was evidence. Clara grew more suspicious as my behavior shifted. She said, "You've changed," one night, her eyes scanning me like a predator assessing prey. "You're keeping something from me." I forced a smile, telling her she was imagining things, but her suspicion lingered. She started checking my phone, questioning my schedule, asking who I was texting. I realized that the more I tried to pull away, the harder she would fight to keep me under her control. The turning point came during a weekend trip she insisted we take. It was supposed to be romantic, a cozy cabin, a quiet lake, just the two of us, but it felt like a prison. She controlled what we ate, when we walked, even how long I looked at the lake before she grew irritated. One night, as we sat by the fire, she leaned against me, her voice soft. "I don't know what I'd do without you. You're everything to me." The words sounded tender, but her eyes held something else, a warning. It wasn't love, it was possession. That night, while she slept, I sat in the dark, staring at the flames. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a life without her. The thought scared me. It felt impossible, but it also gave me a sliver of hope. Maybe I wasn't trapped forever. Maybe I could take back the pieces of myself she had stolen. When we returned home, I reached out to Mark again. "I think I need help," I admitted. He didn't hesitate. "Then let's start. You're not alone in this." His words were the first lifeline I had felt in years. Over the next few weeks, I began making small changes. I reconnected with my sister, grabbing coffee with her after work. I told Clara I was working late when I wasn't, just so I could have time to breathe. Each step felt dangerous, like walking on thin ice. But each step also reminded me that I still had choices. Clara noticed the distance. One evening, she cornered me in the kitchen, her voice trembling. "You don't love me anymore, do you?" The question was a trap, and I knew it. If I said yes, she would accuse me of lying. If I said no, she would crumble into tears and drag me back into guilt. I paused, searching her eyes, and for the first time, I didn't answer. I simply turned and walked away. Her scream followed me down the hall, raw and furious. It shook me, but it also gave me clarity. The only way out was through confrontation. And though I wasn't ready yet, I knew the day was coming when I would have to face her manipulation head on.
The silence in our apartment after that night was thick and suffocating. Clara tried different tactics. Sometimes she would cry, begging me to tell her what she had done wrong. Other times she would lash out, accusing me of betrayal, screaming that I was ungrateful. I learned quickly that both extremes were meant to achieve the same thing, my submission. The cycle was as familiar as breathing, but something inside me had shifted. I was no longer hypnotized by it. I began to see her words not as truth, but as weapons, sharpened and wielded with precision. And once you see the blade for what it is, you can't unsee it. Mark continued to be my quiet anchor. We met when we could, always in public places, so Clara couldn't track me easily. He never pushed me to leave her outright. He only listened, offered perspective, and reminded me that manipulation thrives in isolation. "She keeps you small by cutting you off from everyone else," he explained one afternoon. "That's why she hates that you're talking to me. She knows if you have another voice in your life, her grip weakens." His words made sense, and yet I still felt torn. Clara wasn't just a manipulator. She was my life. My routines, my habits, even my sense of self were entangled with hers. To walk away meant ripping out entire parts of who I had become. One night, Clara staged what I now recognize as a performance. She cooked my favorite meal, lit candles, put on soft music, and sat across from me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I know I've been hard on you," she said sweetly, "but it's only because I love you so much. I can't stand the thought of losing you." Her words dripped with rehearsed vulnerability, but her gaze was sharp, searching for signs of compliance. I nodded mechanically, pushing food around my plate, and that seemed to satisfy her. Later, when she curled against me in bed, whispering promises of change, I felt nothing but exhaustion. For the first time, her affection didn't warm me, it suffocated me.
The journal in my closet grew thicker, pages filled with dates, quotes, descriptions of fights and reconciliations. I didn't realize it at the time, but writing became my rebellion. Each sentence was an act of reclaiming my narrative from hers. When Clara would twist reality to make me doubt myself, I could open the notebook and see proof that my memory wasn't broken. The lies lost their power when they were exposed to daylight. It wasn't long before Clara discovered something was different. She cornered me again, her voice sharp with suspicion. "You're hiding something. Don't think I don't notice. You're colder, more distant. Who are you talking to?" I shrugged, trying to mask the pounding of my heart, but she wasn't convinced. That night, she rifled through my phone while I showered, demanding passwords, accusing me of cheating. When she found nothing, she accused me anyway. That was her genius. Truth didn't matter. The accusation itself was enough to keep me on the defensive. But instead of breaking me down, her fury only confirmed what I already knew. I had to leave. The realization terrified me, but it was also liberating. I began quietly planning, thinking about logistics I hadn't dared to consider before. Where would I go? What would I take with me? Could I do it without her finding out? I spoke to my sister in vague terms, testing the waters. To my relief, she didn't hesitate. "If you need a place, you always have one," she said firmly. The thought of an exit, however small, gave me strength. Clara must have sensed it. Manipulators always do. Her tactics grew more desperate. Lavish gifts, sudden declarations of love, dramatic threats about hurting herself if I ever left. Each ploy was designed to reel me back into the cycle, and though the guilt was heavy, I resisted more each time. I began to notice her patterns like choreography. Push, pull, punish, reward. Once you see the dance, you realize you don't have to keep moving to the music. The final straw came one evening when I told her I was going out with colleagues after work. It was a lie. I was meeting Mark. But Clara didn't know that. She exploded. She followed me into the hallway, blocking the door, her face twisted with rage. "You don't get to walk out on me. You belong to me." The words echoed in my head, raw and chilling. For years, she had implied so much, but this was the first time she said it outright. And instead of terrifying me into submission, it lit something fierce inside me. I pushed past her. My hands were shaking, my heart racing, but I walked out the door. She screamed after me, threats and insults that rang through the stairwell, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. That night, sitting across from Mark in the same cafe where it all began, I realized I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. For the first time, I'd chosen myself over her. And yet, I knew it wasn't over. People like Clara don't simply let go. If I was going to end this, it would have to be deliberate, strategic, final.
The night I pushed past Clara was the night everything shifted. I didn't sleep when I got back. I sat in the dark of our apartment, her quiet breathing next to me a constant reminder that I was living in enemy territory. I had taken my first step toward freedom, but I knew one slip could pull me back into the web. Clara had always thrived in chaos, and now that she sensed her grip slipping, I expected the storm. I wasn't wrong. The next morning, she was uncharacteristically calm. She made breakfast, humming as though nothing had happened, and kissed my cheek before I left for work. But when I checked my phone at lunch, there were 27 missed calls and a dozen messages, photos of pills, vague threats, tearful apologies, declarations of undying love. It was the cycle condensed into hours, and I felt the weight of all those years pressing down on me. I almost called her back, almost gave her what she wanted, but instead I deleted the messages and turned off my phone. That simple act, choosing silence, felt like rebellion. I confided in Mark more openly after that. He helped me outline a plan, practical and meticulous. First, I needed to move my essentials, documents, clothes, money, out of the apartment without Clara noticing. Second, I had to secure a place to stay. My sister's offer lingered in my mind, but I worried about dragging her into the storm Clara was capable of creating. Mark suggested a short-term rental under my name alone, somewhere Clara wouldn't expect. It was expensive, but the price of freedom had never been cheap. The hardest part wasn't the logistics. It was the guilt. Clara had a way of planting doubts deep inside me. Even as I planned my escape, a voice whispered, "What if she really loves you? What if you're abandoning her when she needs you most?" It was absurd. I knew the manipulation for what it was, but guilt doesn't need truth to feel real. Clara, perhaps sensing my withdrawal, doubled down. She began showing up at my office unannounced, bringing lunches, smiling too brightly, hugging me tightly in front of my coworkers. To them, she looked like the perfect partner. To me, it was surveillance disguised as affection. That night, she accused me again, her tone venomous. I know there's someone else. No one just pulls away like this. Who is she? Her words cut close to the truth, but I didn't flinch. There's no one, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She studied me, searching my eyes for cracks, but for once, I didn't give her the satisfaction. Days turned into weeks, and my double life grew more defined. At home, I played the role, smiled when she smiled, offered just enough attention to keep her suspicion from boiling over. Secretly, I funneled small amounts of money into a separate account, hid a suitcase at Mark's place, and told my boss I might need some unexpected time off. Every step felt like walking on thin ice, but every step also brought me closer to solid ground. One evening, I came home late to find Clara waiting in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned. She said, I know you're leaving me. The words froze me in place. I can feel it. You think you're so clever, but I see everything. She smiled then, a slow, cruel smile. If you walk that door for good, I'll ruin you. I'll tell everyone what a monster you are. Your family, your job, everyone will know. You'll have nothing. For a moment, fear paralyzed me. Clara had always known where to strike. But then I remembered the journal in my closet, pages of her lies, her rages, her contradictions. I had evidence, and more importantly, I had resolute. Do what you have to, I said quietly, surprising even myself. Her smile faltered. For once, my calm rattled her. That night, I didn't sleep again. I knew she would escalate. I knew the storm was just beginning. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a prisoner waiting for punishment. I felt like a soldier preparing for battle. The difference was everything. The plan was almost ready. The only question left was whether I could execute it before Clara sensed enough to stop me. The morning I finally decided to move was gray and wet, the kind of weather Clara hated. She was still in bed when I left for work, her hair spread across the pillow, one hand loosely gripping my side of the blanket, like she was trying to anchor me there. I looked at her longer than I should have, torn between pity and dread, before I quietly slipped out. My suitcase had already been smuggled to Mark's weeks before, packed with the bare essentials. I had hidden my most important documents in a folder inside my briefcase. Today wasn't the end, but it was the start of the end, and every cell in my body hummed with both fear and anticipation. At the office, I could barely focus. The minutes dragged like hours. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, half expecting Clara's voice, half expecting nothing at all. By lunch, I had made up my mind. I would not go home tonight. I would not slip back into the routine one more time. Mark texted me the address of the rental apartment we'd secured, a small but clean place on the other side of the city. He said he'd leave the key under the mat. My heart pounded as I read the message, because suddenly, everything was real. When the workday ended, I didn't take my usual train. Instead, I walked 3 extra blocks and boarded a bus Clara wouldn't think to check. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half convinced she'd appear, her sharp eyes cutting through the crowd. Paranoia was hard to shake after so many years of surveillance disguised as love. But she wasn't there. No one was watching me. For the first time, I felt anonymous, untethered, free. The apartment was small, just 2 rooms and a kitchenette. But to me, it felt like a palace. I ran my fingers along the countertop, the furniture, the window frame, marveling that every inch belonged to me alone. No one else's moods filled the space. No one else's accusations echoed in the walls. It was quiet, blessedly quiet. I collapsed on the couch and closed my eyes, letting the silence seep into me like medicine. But freedom had its price. My phone was still on, vibrating constantly. Dozens of calls, messages, voicemails, all from Clara. At first I ignored them, but curiosity gnawed at me. I played one voicemail, her voice raw with rage. Where the hell are you? You think you can just disappear? You think I won't find you? You belong to me. Don't forget that. My stomach knotted. Another voicemail followed, this time tearful, broken. Please, baby, I can't do this without you. I'm sorry, come home. We can fix this, please. The swings between rage and despair were familiar, but hearing them from the safety of my new space made them sound almost scripted. Like I had finally stepped far enough away to see the performance for what it was. I didn't answer. For the first time, I let her calls go unanswered. That night, I slept better than I had in years, though part of me still expected to wake to Clara standing over me. The following days were both liberating and terrifying. At work, I pretended nothing had changed, but every evening I went not to the apartment with Clara, but to my own secret refuge. She kept calling, then emailing, then showing up at my office. My coworkers thought it was endearing at first. Your girlfriend really loves you, huh? But I saw the suspicion growing in their eyes as Clara's behavior became harder to explain. She cried in the lobby one afternoon until security had to escort her out. That night, I received a string of messages accusing me of humiliation, of betrayal, of cruelty. I blocked her number. The silence that followed was deafening, but it gave me room to breathe. Mark was my lifeline through it all. He reminded me of the plan, kept me focused on the long game. He'll get worse before she gets better, he warned. He'll try everything. Guilt, anger, threats, but you've got to hold firm. He was right. A week after I left, Clara showed up at my sister's house, crying and pleading at the door. My sister, bless her, didn't let her in. She called me instead, her voice shaking. She knows, Daniel. She knows you're gone. That night, Clara sent me an email with photos attached. Old pictures of us, together, smiling, laughing, in love. The subject line was simple. Remember us? For a moment, it worked. I stared at the photos, my chest aching, remembering the good times that had once blinded me to the bad. But then I looked closer. In every picture, I saw it now. The subtle tension in my posture, the shadow in my eyes, the way I leaned away from her touch without realizing it. The photos weren't proof of love, they were proof of survival. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I returned to the rental one evening to find the door slightly ajar. My pulse spiked. I stepped inside cautiously, and there she was, Clara, sitting on the couch like she belonged there. My suitcase was open beside her, my clothes strewn across the floor. She looked up, eyes blazing. So this is where you've been hiding. My throat dried. How did you... You're not as clever as you think you are. You think you can just run away from me after everything I've given you, after everything we've been through? I tried to stay calm, though my heart hammered against my ribs. You need to leave, Clara. This isn't your place. She laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. Isn't my place? You are my place, Daniel. You always will be. If I can't have you, no one will. Fear surged through me, but I forced myself not to show it. I'm done, Clara. You can scream, you can threaten, but you don't control me anymore. Her face twisted, caught between rage and disbelief. She stood, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You'll regret this. Then she shoved past me and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I locked it behind her, my hands shaking. My refuge had been invaded. My secret wasn't secret anymore. I knew she'd be back. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at the door, waiting for the next move. Freedom was so close I could taste it, but Clara was a storm that wouldn't pass quietly. I knew now the final confrontation was inevitable. The only question was whether I would have the strength to withstand it. The next morning, I woke to silence, but the tension in the apartment was thick, almost suffocating. Clara hadn't returned, but I knew it was only a matter of time. She always came back, angry, pleading, manipulative, until the cycle reset. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times, and now it was real. I had to confront her, not with fear, not with guilt, but with the clarity I had fought so hard to reclaim. I called Mark and explained what happened. She's testing you, he said quietly. She'll escalate if she thinks you're wavering. Stand your ground. You've got this. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I felt that confident. My hands were trembling, my chest tight. But I had to act, and I had to act now. I didn't wait for her to come back to the apartment. Instead, I went to her last known location, the cafe where we had first talked seriously about our relationship, the place where I had confided in Mark for the first time. If she wanted to confront me, I would meet her there, in a public space under my control. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting in a corner with a coffee cup clenched between her hands, her eyes scanning the street as if expecting me to appear. She looked almost fragile, and for a moment, the old emotions surged. Fear, love, pity, but I pushed them down. I had come to reclaim my life, not to fall back into her trap. She looked up when I approached, her eyes widening. You came, she said softly, almost a whisper. You're not afraid of me? I'm not afraid anymore, I said firmly. Clara, this ends today. Her lips trembled. Ends? What do you mean? I can't live without you. Her voice was panicked now, unsteady. I'll do anything, Daniel. Anything. I'll change, I swear. I won't hurt you again. I stared at her, seeing through the carefully constructed facade. You can't change, Clara. This isn't about love, it's about control. And I'm done being controlled. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were no longer capable of moving me. I had seen the patterns too many times, understood them too deeply. You can't just walk away from me, she said, her voice rising. I'll make sure no one believes you. I'll ruin you. You'll have nothing left. I took a deep breath. I don't care anymore. I've already survived you, Clara, and now I'm going to live. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. She stared at me, searching for some crack, some hesitation, but there was none. The old dynamic, the manipulation, the fear, the cycles of punishment and reward, was gone. I had stepped out of it, and there was no going back. She rose abruptly, knocking her chair over, and stormed out of the cafe. For a moment, I considered following her, fearing her next move, but I didn't. I stayed seated, breathing in the freedom that I had fought for, tasting it fully for the first time in years. In the days that followed, Clara tried to contact me through every possible channel. Calls, texts, emails, even showing up at my workplace. But I remained firm. Block, delete, ignore. Each time she failed, a little more of the weight lifted from my shoulders. It was exhausting, yes, but it was also exhilarating. The chains had finally been broken. I moved fully into my new apartment, unpacking my life piece by piece. The journal I had started months ago now filled an entire drawer. I reconnected with friends, with family, and with the parts of myself that had been buried under years of manipulation. I laughed again without hesitation. I made choices freely, and I discovered that the person I had feared losing was still there, waiting beneath the layers of guilt and control. It wasn't easy. Some nights I dreamed of Clara, imagined her words, her presence, but I would wake, breathe, and remind myself, she no longer had power over me. Every step forward was a reclamation of myself, a declaration that my life belonged to me and me alone. Months later, I ran into Clara in the street. She didn't recognize me at first. My posture, my confidence, the calm in my eyes. She tried to approach, to speak, to manipulate, but I passed by without a word. No glances, no reaction, nothing for her to grab onto. It was the final victory. She could scream, plead, threaten, but she had no control, no leverage, no sway over the life I had rebuilt. And as I continued down the street, feeling the sunlight on my face, I realized something profound. Freedom isn't about running away. It's about reclaiming yourself, step by step, thought by thought, moment by moment. Manipulation thrives in the shadows, in doubt, in silence. Once you bring it into the light and face it with courage, its power evaporates. I had faced it. I had survived it. And I was finally, unequivocally free.